looks crazy. Why does that camera look so wackadoo? Alright. Here we go. We're getting ready to wreck the rank ladder. Team's in a game at the moment, and then I'm gonna get in and get some work done. Having a problem with the post. Settling all that out. No, it's a Z I want to. Do my brother. Do that. Here we go. Who's ready to watch the team wreck the ranked ladder on this fine Wednesday? Hey, I'm streaming. What's up? Okay.
We just learned crate.
You just learned crate?
It went really well.
Nice.
It took like a million videos to show you.
Nice.
Obi, crate. Crate. Crate.
So much energy with everything he does.
There's one that's pretty funny. He gets it wrong. It's this one. This one, baby. Crate.
Oh wait, there's a ball. He's a dum-dum.
This is the first one I took. Like, he was on a roll where it was like immediate every time.
He'll do anything for church.
Yes, he will.
Stop by and say, oh, I don't got my chat open. My apologies.
Air mic.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the rubber band broke.
Daddy's gonna pick him. He was on a roll where
Boom, 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 boom. Stop by and say, oh, I don't got much. My apologies. Alright. I need this to be a chat. Just a chat. And I need this to be able to sounds like it's gonna be an anger-inducing game battle. I need to be able to hit that. Actually, let me switch that around. Oh yeah, you guys hear Grim over there? Sounds like fun. No problem. That's what I do. I'm here to please. You know what I mean? Miss Colleen, what's up? What's up, girlfriend? Welcome to the shit show. I will be streaming momentarily. I I guess I am streaming now. But are we playing momentarily? Waiting for the team. What's the status? There's 2 of you down and just... Oh, you're still up. Okay. I don't got nothing for you, Pop. I got no treats. Get them ready. Oh, hey. Let's put on all this gold stuff. Is the teammate any good? I know he's been being an ass face, but... Oh, I want this scope on that also. That's a bit crazy. Bam, 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 bam. Oh, gotta put some music on. What's up, Mr. Jolly? Welcome to the stream of the jolliness. Boom. Invite accepted. Invite though accepted though. Yeah. See. Boom, yeah, it was just my face because everybody got to see this beautifulness until we're ready for the game. How long do you back there, Mr. Grimbo? Should we play duos?
I don't know. He was gone, he's been gone about 5 minutes.
And it takes him like 2 years to smoke a cigarette, so.
Approximately 2.
Just about. So I need 5 headshots with Caustic, 3 knockdowns is Octane, and 3 knockdowns is anybody. Okay. I feel like I'm not progressing through this battle pass as quickly as I did last season.
Yeah, there's a few kind of like hard to get achievements or whatever. Tell us what you want to find.
Yeah, I need to focus. I didn't get any done in this week yet. Gotta land. Oh, I just gotta land in the sorting factory. That's nice and easy. 50 headshots with LMGs. Finish in the top 3 is Gibraltar, Bloodhound, Caustic, or Bangalore. I can do it as Bangalore. The other 3 will be difficult. Deal 6,000 damage as Wraith, Caustic, Octane, and Watson. 5 kills in a single match. Who do they think I am? Mario Andretti? Neuralink scan 15 enemies as crypto. 10 knockdowns with the charge rifle. I could probably do those.
Offer code Spotify 10.
So how's it going? Are you guys nice and warmed up and ready for ranked, or we're gonna have to do some warming up?
Might as well, yeah. We need a fucking we need a grim signal, like a bad signal, except it's like a cigarette being stomped
Yeah.
out. You shine it over his house.
I mean, he stopped in the stream, and all he said was "just your face," and then left. Yeah. Tell me that it's just my face I was showing, which was because until there's action on the screen, there's no sense in not showing my pretty ass face. I got my lucky Hawaiian shirt on. So it should have been Hawaiian Shirt Wednesday, but it is, I don't know. It's a floral pattern, but it's, I don't know if they're like the hibiscus flower or something. I don't know why I would think I would know what this flower is, but yeah, it's like the classic Hawaiian flower. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, right. So like I say it, and I'm like, I don't know why I would know what that is. So it's probably wrong, but. Yeah. See, this is a educational and sometimes entertaining stream. Everybody, get your kids to tune in. Yeah, the Hawaiian floral knowledge. It's very specific. Actually, I'm gonna go. My rubber band broke from my headset. I'm gonna bring you with me.
Oh, Grim's back. Oh, okay. Oh, I think so your shit's going down.
I know we didn't have problems when we first started, and the things have gotten harder with the time. But you're the one that I made for, so it takes more. That's a mountain that we both gotta climb. I know I say that I change things, and I don't always, and that's nobody else's fault but mine. I know it's hard when I'm gone and I'm on the road always, but please believe you're always on my mind. I know we didn't have problems when this first started, and then things have gotten harder with the time. But you're the one that I made for, so it takes more. That's a mountain that we both gotta climb. All I need in this life is sit as my girlfriend. She was there for the title matches the world did. Through it all, I might have been as betrayed then. But through the song, I'm trying to get a word in. All I need in this life is sit as my girlfriend. She was there for the title matches the world did. Through it all, I might have been as betrayed then. But through the song, I'm trying to get a word.
Oh yeah.
Break and that happens, just gonna pour water out in front of my house forever. I didn't know where like the shut off is. The shut off is like normally in the basement somewhere. Like I can find it if I had a basement. But since I don't, since it's just like a concrete slab.
Oh, it's a crawl space.
Not even. It's Levittown is just like a concrete slab, and then they build the houses on top. So like everything is like hidden somewhere. So like this. And this kitchen was redone, so maybe there was a crawl space in it. But this kitchen was redone, and
Grim sanding.
no, that's me trying to get my rubber band positioned properly. So I can't find it. We have like a waterless or tankless water heater, so in the kitchen there is just a like one of the cabinets is like a false cabinet, and it's just the water heat, the like things there. So like the countertop can actually lift off at that point. So I take that off. And I'm trying to follow all of these pipes with my eyes, and I'm like, okay, if that's cold water and that's hot water, and here says mix, then the cold water, I just follow that line. I'm like, okay, that looks like it runs out that way. I start turning handles. I'm like flipping like the valves. I'm changing all stuff, and I'm like running like this kitchen sink. I'm running this. And I'm like, oh shit, you know what? It's fucking, none of it's working. So then finally, I figure it out. I find it, but it's like because because it's a newer kitchen. Like they redid the kitchen before we bought it. It's behind my corner cabinet. So I have to stick my head and my one arm and shoulder in, and that's like as far as I can get because there's like a shelf and shit, and I have to reach all the way across the back as far as I can, just like barely get my fingers on. And there's like a little square cut in the back of the cabinet, and it was such a pain in the ass. It took me so long to do. I'm on my hands and knees in the kitchen just trying to get this to work. Finally, I get it to work. I'm like, oh, my fingers are all cut up from work and they're all dry and like split and stuff, so it was so hard to turn. Finally get it turned. But in that process, I'm coming out of the cabinet, I'm sliding backwards. My floor is actually split a little bit, like it's like fake wood floor. They're not sealed in place, they're not stuck in place. Yeah, those little gaps. And I caught my big toenail on it and ripped my toenail. No, my toenail went in the gap as I was backing up, and it ripped the nail. Yes. Yeah, well, no, I had to trim some of it, just so like it's all torn and it wouldn't get caught on other stuff. Yeah, and it was like bleeding and shit. It fucking sucked. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know who, this is such a terrible idea. This is the first year I'm turning it off. Because the outside spigot worked, the hose out front. Yeah. Well, I mean, like but mine, since mine is, everything is right on the first floor. Ours, we don't really need to if we can turn the outside one off, but the outside one is busted, and I can't shut the outside one off. So the hose is just full of water, so I had to turn the inside one off. You know what I mean? Because like mine, it's behind. It's behind the corner cabinet. Remind me, I'll have to show you next time you're over. It was so far. It was like ridiculous. Hey, you didn't get a gun, Grim? Okay. There's a Spitfire and some heavy ammo up here if anybody's interested. Okay. I probably should go with that Spitfire because I do have to do a LMGs damages. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go back and get that. Shit, what building was that? Was it this building? No, hold on, let me alright, I'm on my way. Oh, okay. Oh, somebody's calling her special on me? No, I think it's a, yeah, it's a special. Oh shit, that like went through the roof. Oh, it's still my face. I put my face back on while we're waiting.
On Facebook, it showed the game. How do I keep missing the goddamn?
I knocked one using my special guy move.
Alright, alright. Oh, he just.
Yeah, he just grenaded back at us.
Oh, one up. I broke this dude's shield. He's invisible. Or he bamboozled. What the fuck? What
See
the?
him? Tell me if you see him.
No, I don't see him.
I hear him shielding up. I think he's got a fast. Oh, you got a fast shield?
I was sealed up too real quick.
Oh no, maybe I
It
did.
sounded like it was going. I heard like 4. Like, bow, bow, bow. Oh, here's a blue
Oh yeah, that was him.
bag if anybody's interested.
I got no man.
Oh, here, I might have some for you.
Oh yeah.
Oh shit, we gotta go. Wall.
Oh shit. This shit's coming. Alright, I'm gonna over. Is there a zip line anywhere? Yeah.
Those kids are going to be right around us here somewhere.
And there's more boxes in here.
Shit, I was trying to drop you some heals.
Oh dude, I'm the
Oh yeah, they're right.
Yeah.
Shit, they're here.
Oh, you're not gonna make it?
One down.
Somebody's
Good
coming
kill,
from behind
good
you
kill.
guys.
I'm smoking us.
Okay.
Here's 0.
There.
Syringe right where I pinged.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh, there you go. Actually, here, you actually need it much worse than I do. Take my last one.
Oh, where's this guy? I'm trying to.
Fuck out of here, brah. Ah, the last guy's right here. This guy's right here.
I got him.
Somebody else?
He's sliding down.
Yeah.
Right here. Up the guy tried to jump up.
That guy's hurt. He hurt. Oh shit, no, not into the storm, not into the storm.
Where'd he go?
I'm sure he's in the storm, he's healing
I
now.
just ran away.
Alright, see if you can grab a shield out of one of those boxes. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's up, Miss Ashley?
I didn't get those syringes
Oh shit, okay.
because I was
Yeah.
trying to help
Here,
her.
there's 3 syringes in there. Oh, they're
Good.
okay. Then I'll grab those. I can use them. I got.
Yeah, we should box you up.
Yeah, there's all kinds of shit.
No,
Sorry,
no,
John.
no. Here,
Where'd you
take
say
these.
the syringes were? Alright. Thank you.
Oh, another one of those guys.
Shit, I hear him. They're right here.
Okay.
There's one. The other one's down. Scorpion on your top.
Nice.
Got her.
Got him.
Very nice. Well done, people. Oh wait, no. Yeah, no, that's what I was trying to think. A U site if y'all need it.
We got 11 seconds. You gotta be quick. Gotta be quick. 20 seconds.
Yeah. So this is zipper room.
Oh wait, let's go up. Go up the track.
Okay.
Go up the track.
Yeah, I only got 2 syringes.
I couldn't throw it until I got on level ground.
Oh, gravy. Oh, gravy 0.
Bitch ass fame. Give me heals.
Some field stuff. Oh, no, I got it.
There's a bunch of light out here.
I thought you picked that up. I can use it.
Oh, is the tunnel still in the tunnel is in the storm, so we gotta stay up top.
Yeah, we're not going to
I hear somebody, I think.
Alright.
Yep, I do.
Yep, they just threw their special right up here. Other side of the steps, it looked like.
They're over here. They're trying to keep on the back.
Alright, I'm with you.
There's somebody else, I think.
Shit. Oh no. On the tracks, I'm a dead man. Hey, that one's down, Grim, good job. One right in front of you, practically.
Oh shit, they're on me. Right here.
Oh shit! I'm burning! I'm dead. Fuck.
Yeah, I'm on the ground.
Good try, good try. We were positive, shit. We did good that game. It was just rough situations.
Mm-hmm.
What? 6 years.
Good job.
Not bad.
Yeah, man.
Go.
Go team!
Yeah, it was our first ranked in the
Well, at least you got some points.
Yeah, yeah.
8. I'll
Probably
take it.
got pretty decent, didn't you, Grim? I only had 8, because I only had 1 kill in it. Yeah, Grim had 3
Yeah.
kills, so.
I had 40 points.
I got my. I'm telling you, it's the Hawaiian shirt. The lucky Hawaiian shirt.
Is that lucky Hawaiian shirt?
Makes you feel like Maggie.
Mhm. And I'm eating my Takis. Happy as a pig in shit. Oh, you guys probably didn't hear about it. Zed sent me a story. Mercules was arrested. You know the rapper Mercules I listen to? He was arrested.
Oh, yeah.
I guess the day after Halloween or whatever, or maybe on Halloween, for giving out his CD to trick-or-treaters. And there was a quote from the parents. Yeah, there was a quote from the parents. The music was good, but it was inappropriate for our children. So when I read that, I'm like,
How do you get arrested
for giving explicit, explicit material to a minor, because it's probably parental advisory and the parents weren't advised. Yeah.
Do you have it? Peter in the
Well, he says the F word a lot. I don't know. But anyway,
that's something that we can't.
Yeah. Like when I.
Is he on
When I-
Megan's list now, or what?
Megan's Law, the pedo list. Yeah, but like the parents actually gave a quote. The music was good. It was just inappropriate. Like, are you kidding me? Like, if you like the music, why would you like call the cops?
That's retarded.
Yeah, that's lame, dude. I wonder what. Oh, you said it's good.
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, when I read that quote, I'm like, there's no way that's real. And then Zed said he looked into it and it is actually real.
Damn.
You said pedo. That's how they say
Yeah.
it in England. I say pedo personally, but the reason I brought that up, there's this show I watch. I mean, I've watched. It's a sitcom.
I don't know. I think we catch that train before it lands. I don't know.
Maybe.
And if I was going to try to catch it where I think, now I'm like, I think we can at least get on here.
There's two more
Yeah,
teams.
yeah, we got it. Yeah.
One's already landed on
Stop
that.
it. Stop it.
Oh, yep. Oh, they're arc starring at us.
Oh, I got stuck.
You got somewhere
I'm dead.
off to find a gun. Come on, fucking bin.
You gotta go ham and potatoes there, Dan.
God damn. Alright, I'm gonna try to go ham as a mofo. It's 10 o'clock.
Oh shit, I'm stuck between the I was trying to crawl away.
Probably
But
get the purple vest.
they're around me, dude. They're whole team's right
You
here.
crawled off?
One's in the train, two are on the tracks.
That was more like vegetables.
Damn.
You win string beans.
That was like an impossible right there.
Yeah. But like, so this show I watched, there's this woman gets a date with this guy, and the guy's name is Peter. And you know how they
Yeah.
how they kind of like do soft R's sometimes, and it's like pedophile. And she's like, no, it doesn't sound like pedophile. She ends up, she won't date the guy anymore because like they're in an airport. She's like, hey, I got
Yeah.
a key. I'll be right back.
That Zero's weird with his pedophile jokes.
What?
I said that Zero's weird with his pedophile jokes. Oh, they're hot as shit.
That was work
Sucks.
Yeah.
I'm on the floor, it's not bad, but they got me, like, I mean, just like any job, it's fucking run super poorly. Like, Sunday, I guess it was, or Saturday, I was the only guy in the building. And, yeah, so,
Was the store closed?
no, there was women there, but I was the only man.
Oh, you mean the only man?
No, it was Monday actually. So after, we were processing.
So when you do anything,
Yes,
remotely,
everything.
heavy.
So it was like 1 o'clock, and the other processors leave, and the one lady tells me like, yeah, like finish this line, do as much as you can, and then if you get done that, do like this stuff. We gotta like clear this because we got a 1,400 piece truck coming tomorrow. So I'm like, okay.
Oh my gosh.
And then they call me to do rugs. I hear the call on the walkie. Like, customer assistant needing the rugs. So I'm like, alright, I don't do anything because like I'm in the back. I didn't realize I was the only man, the only guy in the store at the time. I hear it again. Then somebody, I hear on the walkie like, who's gonna do rugs? Joe, can you do rugs? I'm like, fuck, I mean, I guess I can. Go out, do that. I gotta go back in the back and try to like do that on my downtime. And then like, oh Joe, customer needs like these chairs carried out. Customer needs like all this stuff, these heavy things returned. Like,
Sounds like your customer needs a lift, bro.
Yeah, you can live.
And it was just some bullshit. And then like that's whatever. I mean, it's like poor planning. Well, I don't know why there's only one guy scheduled. Now it's supposed to be done at 4, and the manager asked me if I can stay till 4:30 till the kid who was working rugs came in. So I said, yeah, he don't show up till like 5 o'clock. And then that's whatever. I'll help them if they need help. I don't care. I'll help anybody. But then, come Tuesday, in the back, we're doing whatever, and we gotta hurry up and get everything done. And then they call for rugs again, and the guy the coordinator of furniture, which is right next to rugs, he's there. Now, he doesn't ever take anything off the truck. He'll open up like furniture and like put easy shit together in the back room, like in our way all the time, but he never takes anything off the truck. Tuesday, yeah, I see them. Tuesday, I'm coming with you. He's taking shit off the truck. So he doesn't, so when they're calling for rugs, he comes in the back and starts taking shit off the truck, so he doesn't have to do the rugs. So then I had to leave the back room and go do the rugs while he's on the floor, and I still had to like leave the back room and go do that shit. Like, I was so fucking mad.
Oh, so then he left. Oh, you got a wingman? What's that? Oh, you're not using it?
I'm giving that to Joe. If he, I don't think he's
Oh, you
on
don't have a
guard
gun yet?
Yeah, I'll take the wingman. Wingman.
So why don't you go to the other building?
Yeah.
People landed there?
Yeah, the whole squad.
Well, go fuck them up. Oh, you said turtles, yeah. I don't have much. I got a little bullet.
Was there any bullets with the? Yeah, there's bullets with the wingman. I'm dropping an RE45 if anybody wants it.
Yeah, I dropped. I think I'm hearing people.
I hear him. Yeah, they're in the building.
Oh my god, those Takis were so hot.
Oh, I forgot who it was. Come on.
Shit.
Got one.
Austin coming at you, hurt
Oh,
bad.
God. They got me right there.
Give it. Nice. Oh, that grenade's gonna hurt. Where's the last one?
Kids die.
Right here. Damn. I missed. I should not have had the peacekeeper or the wingman out. Gracias. So.
Squad. Teamwork. Grim, are you muted? Thought you were muted.
Oh, I hear somebody zipping.
Okay. Oh, shit. I gotta go.
Yeah, I gotta heal up too. I'm hiding and healing.
I hear him.
Shit! Oh, fuck my luck. Shit. And one climbed up on his back. Now they're both up back.
Okay.
God damn.
Alright,
This one's almost dead, but all three. You got three of them.
let me heal up all the way if I can. The fuck, man. Game's over. Hurry up. Make it a quick bathroom. God damn it, man.
Yeah, we get third party. The only reason I landed there, I needed a knockdown. I got it. Yeah, what somebody like call out or work?
They just schedule it. I don't know who's scheduling it, but it's like they're fucking drunk. And like all this week, they scheduled me. I was working 8 to 4 the first week. Then I worked 9 to 5 the second week. Then I worked 8 to 4 like 2 days, and now I'm 8 to 2 like every day. And they gave me Friday and Saturday off this week and next week, which like I don't know why. Like I mean I'm just happy the days are together. Yeah, I just got an invite from Crazy J.
Put us all down real quick.
Me too.
Oh, that's the guy we did.
Oh, was it?
He's our first
Oh,
man.
good. Well, so then it was his fault we died.
It's
I wonder if it's one of your videos. Well, Joe's viewer account just.
Yeah.
Somebody just stepped into the airlock.
Gotta get decontaminated in the airlock. Obviously.
I like being on the outside of inside jokes. Whip it real good.
Yeah, I was just saying that sounded like an airlock.
I didn't even hear it the first time.
Yeah. Oh. I know that from my time with the Space Command days.
Like I'm in space camp.
Yeah. Did you guys ever see that old fucking that movie from like the 80s or 90s where the kids go to a space camp and somehow they actually get on some kind of shuttle launch or some shit and they gotta save the day? I can't remember. Maybe it's called Space Camp. It's
That's
just
funny.
some stupid ass kids movie. Yeah.
And it's probably called Space Camp too.
It probably it dealt with space camp. That's what it called that.
Can't say that I have seen that.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called.
Alright, I'm gonna land in this first bin right there.
Or I'm gonna try to land in that far back one.
All right, I'm gonna land at the drill site. Yeah.
Mix shit up.
Just to mix it up a little bit. There's a body
Yeah, we got a bunch of people landing.
Slide across for it.
Oh goddamn, there's another dude. I'm dropping.
Oh yeah, these
Being pursued.
up. Fucking me up.
There's a guy with me. Just killed me standing on my body.
What? Are you fucking kidding me? Are you? Oh my god! I unloaded a full clip of the 99 into him, and fucking. Well, I guess not a full clip. I did like 70 damage or something. And then I run out of bullets, and then he does a little bit of damage to me. I jump out the window. I have no shield, but like 80% of health left, and then we get into a little duel, and he fucking like one shots me with a shotgun. Like I should have fucking won that.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Why do you continue to invite us?
What the fuck? Who shot at me?
This happened once before with a guy,
I had 100 health.
and
Who shot at me?
someone just kept inviting me, and then
Who shot at me with the Eva? Yeah.
I messaged him, was like, do I know you? And then they just like stopped inviting me.
I don't see him in my friends, like my online friends here. Hold on a minute.
Oh, so this
Let me
is
look.
a Crazy J story? Something actually you
No,
someone
no.
else saying
The opposite.
No, I don't. I was seeing if he was in my friends list here.
something? Now, who's Mysterious Mist? Are they sending
No.
invites too?
No. I guess they got murked, and maybe they're the kids we murked in that first, or in that Skyhook level, and they're like, bots! Why do you guys use
No.
bots, bitch?
Bot ass bitch.
It's our
Somebody sent me a
brains.
message once, called me a bot. I hit him in art class and really far away while they were running. And I took it as a compliment.
As a what bot?
Yeah.
Oh, hell, there's got to be skill involved with a long-range art star bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a lot of luck.
Some of both. Some of both, yeah.
Yeah.
A little
I mean,
bit of...
yeah. As it was like at the artillery, as they're like running up the steps from like the middle of the place by the tank, I just like chucked it towards where they were and just like landed on it and then killed them. And then like, you're a bot.
The Arc Star bot. Gotta scan one more survey, BG.
Damn it. Damn it, damn it, damn it. All right, here we go. I'm gonna shake off the.
Shake your dicks, it's pissing contest.
I'm gonna shake off the Tourette's.
I got threats all over me.
You're okay.
I don't know. I'm thinking about locking open.
Oh, you got a gun?
Yeah, I'm good.
Not sure if we'll stand it.
I would try. He needs to. He can't be free run to the house. I don't think.
But I mean, he comes and he goes.
I got
so-
you one. I'm alright.
But that's what I'm gonna try to do, so you might be able to free shit.
Okay. This is Mercury's. I don't know. Harvey.
Sorry, Chitties.
Yeah, you know what's think about it.
When you think about it, it doesn't make any sense.
Who is it?
Me.
I heard Kim talking after I said that, so I was like, I didn't realize you were talking about it.
Okay. Oh, I think I hear a loot, bitch. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to say, when I think about it, it is
That's
weird
gold.
that a rapper would be handing out albums to like
Yeah.
8-year-olds.
Oh, somebody shoot me.
No, I dropped the gold thing.
Oh shit. Oh yeah, it'll do damage on
Wait,
you.
maybe that exploded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it fell on you.
I did pull this really cool move one time. We landed at the train station.
Wrong button. Shit.
I zipped across. I killed somebody while I was zipping across. And then I shot him, one of those circle things, the loop.
Right.
And then on the way, and then hit the ground. I like jumped, just as it falling, and on the way down, I ended up like karate kicked it to death from the air in the same
Nice.
movie. It was just like, yeah, it was sweet. I probably should have recorded it. It's got once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
I got nothing. I got Mozambique and 301, 14 bullets.
Oh shit. Well, there was a Havoc.
Prowler.
And some other shit.
Oh, was
Yeah, I
that?
saw
Yeah.
Scout.
I didn't realize you were that hurt. I dropped the Havoc for that, for an alternator. And then I dropped my energy ammo. I pinged the ammo. I didn't ping the Havoc.
All we have here is a failure to communicate.
Uh-huh.
Well, I got a Prowler.
There you
So
go.
I could use,
Selecto Firo.
yeah, that's what I mean.
I'm dropping a Prowler. I don't have a select fire.
There's a double cap.
There you go. There's a Havoc with some energy rounds.
There's another double tap. Damn.
Oh, there's some heavy ammo up here. And then there's 3 boxes of heavy and some light.
I could use mainly light. My main gun is real one right now. Found it's like 500.
I can give. I need some heavy. Did one of y'all take all that?
Yeah, here I can drop some.
Yeah, I got a
I can drop some light for you too, Grim.
Thank you. Yeah, I got light.
Oh, there's a couple bins.
Oh, I got double heavy. So
There's some heavy.
there's your select fire.
Oh.
I mean, it's hard to do.
Alright, you wanna go get some? I think they're over there, yeah.
Yeah, we're spread out.
Some
I
loose there.
think on this rank shit, we need to be in a squad when we can.
Yeah, I concur. I concur.
You're 2 to 4 in here.
Sorry, Joe, you can walk.
I concur.
I try all the time. I can do it too. Right on first.
Oh, we actually know where they are? Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think I see a Gibraltar shield. Is that what I saw through the doorway? Yeah.
Yeah. I think you don't know where.
There's a purple. There's boxes here.
Okay.
So it might be, okay.
Oh shit, Grim. Okay, yeah, work on it, work on it.
Oh, I got, really?
Yeah,
That
they
bad?
buffed it.
That fucking Gibraltar shit?
Okay, oh, come on. Ooh.
Broke his shield and he's almost down.
Thank you, yeah. You
Oh, he's right here.
first away.
Nice, good shooting. Good shooting.
Thank you, sir. I was afraid.
So they
Yeah.
buffed that thing? I had like full health. I had like 40
Yeah.
seconds died from 150 damage. From like explosion and shit.
Damn. There's a shitload of boxes.
Yeah.
behind us, too, from where we ran from.
Yeah, I'm gonna heal up and then I'm gonna go look for that shit. There's at least 2 purple and 1 blue I saw across the street.
Yeah, yeah. OMW.
Smoking you so you have cover. Ah, that's a gold box. I thought that was purple on the way over.
Thanks. This is just a threat site.
Oh shit. Fuck yeah. No, you can have it. I can't take it, apparently. It's all you.
Yeah, I think I'm
I apparently already have one. I didn't realize that.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to ping it. I don't know if I ever actually was able to, but I tried. over and over and over again. And it was not letting.
Shit,
No, we got a minute.
We maybe should move.
there's a gunfire every direction. You gotta go time.
Let's.
Yeah, let's go get safe and wait for them
Oh, okay.
and drop a surprise death on them.
Oh, here's these 2 boxes.
Yeah, I looted one of them.
Might be something useful. Okay.
So I guess you gotta go through the tunnel. Looks like the tunnel's gonna be flat.
And I feel like we're early enough.
No, well these bins aren't open, so maybe not.
Does anybody have a single syringe?
Yeah. I dropped some on the tracks.
Thank you. Thanks.
There's 2.
Oh, I don't even need that one. Thank you. I got plenty of heals now.
Well,
Purple light mag and a purple barrel stabilizer. You guys saw that?
Oh, thanks. I got a purple
Okay.
barrel.
Oh, so do we have to go through another tunnel? Or no, we can just go straight that way. You want to go
I
through
don't
the
care.
tunnel or straight out?
Whatever. Tunnel takes us more into the. I don't know, man. I don't know which one. Either one is fine.
Let's run around.
All right.
The end is near. It's the final days of the massive historic going out of business sale at all 7 Neely's furniture locations. We're selling out to the bare walls, and it's all got to go. Nothing can be left that the brooms can't sweep up. Now
It can be a little cautious with 2 squads in the top 5.
dining rooms, bedrooms, and mattresses, plus quality handmade or
You never know.
everything must and will be sold. Hurry! The clock
I hear some shooting ahead of us, it sounds like.
of the massive going out of business sale forever at
I
Neely's.
think it's around the rock and to the left.
Yeah. Oops.
Everybody know my name now. No, I didn't want to slide off. God damn it.
Yeah, one less squad. One squad just got put out.
Put that on their ass.
I think they just got 3P'd. It sounds. I think that's the same people because it sounded far away when you first called it out.
Poopsily.
See them on that ridge anymore.
I'm concerned about the train tracks to our right. I don't know. I got a feeling like we're gonna get popped.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you want to get,
Oh, yeah.
shit is right up in that building. And there's one dude. Say when you're ready. Say before you pull the trigger.
I wouldn't get too far away.
I do want to move up
That
then.
guy. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, they're gonna zip.
Zipping down
Send
to
the
us.
zip
Zipping
line
down to
across.
us. Yep. I hit him 3 times. Down 1.
Nice.
There's this fool.
Oh, there's somebody in the building still. Oh, somebody's over here on that building. Oh shit.
I'm throwing a zip to. Oh fuck! I'm down from over there.
Yeah. Oh, and they got me with a fucking fire grenade.
Hey, we did good. We did good. For week number 4.
5.
Number 5. There was 1 dude left. We killed 2 dudes out of that damn squad.
Yeah, that dude on the left started fudging me up.
I think it's not the squad.
Yeah, I think so. That other. Yeah, well, I got killed. Yeah, from a roof, like 150, 200 yards away. So yeah. I got 51 points.
I got 21. I'll take it. And I leveled up my battle pass.
Keep it positive, damn it. I want to get to
Yeah.
level 3
Yeah.
within a reasonable period of time.
Wait, so if you go to gold 3, you can still drop down to gold 4 though, right?
Yep.
I think so, yeah.
Yep.
So I guess I want to get to this.
Yeah.
I've been so close to it. I've either been at gold 3 or very close to it. I don't know. I forgot what I was before they changed it, before it set us back.
Don't lie to us now, Zero. We'll never be able to tell.
Gold something, I don't know. Might have been gold 3. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I was, yeah.
Like 2 years ago, when I used to do drugs, and I used to lift 500 pounds, I was apex predator.
Oh, damn. Well, that is-
And I was with you every time you went to work.
I always say in the intro when I'm reading something.
Keep forgetting to stay on the damn beacons.
Shit is crazy, I got nothing to lose. Man, I remember when we used to have something to prove, but I ain't found now. Looking down the list.
You didn't get that yet? I pressed you did at least 2 today, right?
I think I'm just one short. I might have done 2 today.
I know
think
Hans
it's
saying
5
did
total.
more.
Yeah,
And I know you mentioned it before. I mean, well, after that. So,
yeah, I might have done it.
May.
I'll have to look and go back.
scuffle.
It's a scuffle McCuffle? Kerfuffle. It's a kerfuffle.
Yeah.
Right, landing on the end.
Oh, that was your decoy I followed. Shit.
Oh, damn. I did like
Coming,
7
I'm coming.
damage to him.
I downed them, the one person. There's somebody else here
Oh,
though.
you got him?
Oh, their squad is here,
Yeah,
both of them.
coming.
Or maybe it's another squad.
Yeah, shit. I'm down.
It's all you with your kerfuffles.
Got fucking smoked.
Oh my god.
You were like, I don't want no smoke, and they're like, too bad, we're giving you the smoke.
Yeah, that's oh my god.
Look at that. Big old 24 damage I did there. I did it right there, right there. You see that 24 damage there? I did that. I did that all by myself.
Yeah, considering how many points you lose on a bad drop, I don't think it's a fair ranking system anymore. I mean, you can be up, even if we got to gold 3, okay, so we get 500 more points and we get to gold 3. And then you have like a few bad drops and it takes away, oh my god. It just seems to take forever to advance. Like, you know,
Yeah. I'm back at square one.
yeah.
Yeah,
And you
got
were up like,
killing
didn't
you.
you get like,
I was up to 44
I forgot what you said.
when first started.
Okay. I knew you had a big game early on. And... Oh, okay, it was 44. Okay.
Yeah, I might have run up at that. I don't know. I remember I started at nothing. I got up to 44 for the first game.
Started from the bottom, now I'm back. Started from the bottom, now my whole team back.
Yeah.
Well, we got it this game.
Yeah. I assume that was 2 squads that were coming
mean-
on us.
I don't know.
I only saw that, but I did hear.
Yeah, maybe it
saw
was
the
just-
lights.
Fuck, man. Power brick just went off. Fuck, man. Huh? Let me see if I can fix this. How's it going out here? Why you a piece of shit, Power Brick? Got this to work temporarily. I don't know how long it's gonna last. Alright, so what up, Teddy? My power brick broke. So I got it back. See how long it lasts.
So he's locked up. Gonna work out in the shower.
He's in the crate.
Now he's in the room.
Oh, okay.
Now you chippies. You know I wanna hang out with you. Did you want this shut? I'll leave your crap just for yourself.
Okay. I'm back. So we'll see how long it lasts this time.
Yo, hey, you know you were talking about
Yep. Talking about getting.
talking about you were talking about getting a 1X.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Well, you might want to just get a new power brick. Cause like I think the fucking new Xbox is going to be coming out like next year or something.
Really, that's what I'm glad you said something, because that's why I didn't jump and get a new system, because I wanted to look into when the next gen systems would be out. I don't even know what it's supposed to be called.
Yeah,
The
I think
Xbox 2.
I'm pretty sure.
I don't know.
Is it?
But if I, yeah. Confirm that the next generation.
I think the next system's supposed to have a lot better graphics.
Yeah, it'll probably be
I think so.
a huge jump, just like this was from 360, like in processing power and stuff.
It'll probably cost about the same as the 1X, or at least this one of the 1X.
Yeah.
models.
Because they're like $500 or something. It's
Yeah, I think I saw in the Costco advertisements that they've got like $50 off and a 1X, and I think at Walmart the regular 1X and nothing with it is like $3.99. So if you're talking $3.50, that's a good deal. But
Business is
yeah,
the sum
with
of its
the
parts, and
Yeah.
Zoil.com has
Let's see. It says during E3 2019, Microsoft confirmed that the next gen,
pipes and fittings,
next generation Xbox is currently being called Scarlet, and that would launch in
parts for
2020.
safety, building, renovating, plumbing, cleaning, welding, wiring,
okay, yeah,
even
yeah.
parts for taking a break.
Probably
To keep a
holidays
business
2020.
running, every part plays a part. And you can find them all
You know, I
at
think the
Zoil.com. That's
360
ZORO.com.
I don't know if it even was the holidays when it came out. It might have been summer or something. So I didn't. Yeah. What they'll do with it.
Yeah, but I'll be like playing Scarlet by myself. Nah, I probably won't even get that for a while. Like when the one came out.
Shit, the train's here and the bins are up.
Yep,
They
yep.
probably got guns and purple
Dude,
vests.
Yep. Shit, quit running, bitch.
Hey, you're chasing somebody?
Taste my steel.
Damn, he just fucking like one shot at me with that laser rifle. That was insane. Insane in the membrane.
Go, kid.
Oh,
You went around the
Come around the back and chasing Robot with him.
Damn, wait, I'm crawling toward. He's getting somebody up. He's getting somebody up.
Give me your shit really
Nope.
quick, really quick, give me your shit.
I'm just marking him.
Oh, I can't climb that.
let's see. For the new Scarlet, it says
Might be going up some stairs.
future Xbox is just over a year away from becoming a reality. Microsoft's Project Scarlet will arrive in holiday 2020, promising 4 times the power of the Xbox One X,
Oh, one of the dudes.
complete with a slew of exciting features like ray tracing, 8K resolution, and lightning fast SSD.
Yeah, we got screwed.
Don't look at me! Don't look at me!
Joey's still.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just reading about this Project Scarlet. So it is holiday 2020 is when it's set to release. It says it's just over a year away, becoming a reality. Microsoft's Project Scarlet will arrive holiday 2020, promising 4 times the power of the Xbox One X, complete with a slew of exciting features like ray tracing, 8K resolution, and lightning fast SSD. Then it's I don't know what ray tracing is.
Sounds good.
Ray tracing is a newish
Yeah, solid state
solid
drive.
state drive. Like a non-spinning hard drive. It's faster than a hard drive.
Yeah.
Ray tracing is
And then
a neat thing
8K,
they
I
came out
don't
with.
even know if my TV's
Yeah, well,
No,
So,
I bet.
that's
I
what
bet it won't be 8K. It's not going to be 8K games. I'm sure they're trying to give that impression because the One X can
Yeah.
do some 4K games, but not
But none of the
like
games are really even
with
4K.
everything cranked up. Some of them are. Some of them are enhanced with One X and they're 4K, but it's like they've got to turn some options down for
but
it.
what the
So 8K is probably going to be for next generation movies.
what the Xbox One X can do is even if you're playing it in a lower resolution, if you record a clip, it records it in 4K and you can watch it in 4K. So, yeah,
That's cool.
So if you play, so it records in a higher
yeah. So like if you're playing on like your whatever computer monitor or something, and it only has whatever, and then you want to play it back later on like a computer or a TV that's got a higher resolution, you can go up, you can watch it up to 4K. So
That's cool.
so let's see. Yeah, so it says it looks like it's only gonna be $500, which is basically the same
Yeah, wow,
price
that's a
for
great
what
deal.
you're paying.
Yeah,
No.
it says only going
Yeah.
to be 500.
Which is what the X was
So remind me,
new. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started boiling hot dogs like before the last game, so they're probably gonna be ready soon. I'm gonna eat them soon. I
it
don't
also
forget.
says, however, you'll have the option to pay for the Scarlet in installments. The upcoming console has been added to Microsoft's Xbox All Access program, which allows you to finance an Xbox One S or Xbox One X for as little as $19.99 a month. And then,
That's pretty
yeah,
The Jump Master did.
You're a
Yeah.
jump master.
I thought we were going to the. Somebody pinged this. I thought we were going there.
Whichever, I don't care.
So yeah, for $19.99 a month,
You know,
and
yeah.
then yeah, and then All Access members can upgrade to Scarlet later on. So you can finance the current one now for $20 a month, and then upgrade later. So I guess it's like just like the new phone plans all the companies are doing, where you pay monthly and just
I got down.
You just ship it, probably ship it back.
yeah.
Yep, that's got too.
Oh shit, my bad. No, I didn't realize it was you. I heard footsteps and turned in through an arc star.
Man, thanks, man. That's why I said you got bounced out too, because there's running with me after I got bounced out. I don't have a gun yet. Gun 45.
Okay.
I thought I'd.
If you see an extra ball shield, let me know.
There's a devotion.
I thought I. Okay.
And there's the bullets for the devotion.
I'm gonna look up on this little shit for a shield.
Alright, I'm dropping this scout.
Level 1, Mr. Zero. Another Spitfire over here at Eva.
I might hear somebody. Maybe not.
Got my G-code scaring away.
Yeah, suck on this decoy. If you want that G7, either one of you, I saw a double tap right over there.
Oh, right over. Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a charge rifle. I'll stick with the charge rifle, actually. Gracias, though.
It's thing.
Dude, oh man, my stick is screwing up on me. Either that or it was lagging.
Sniper stock. That's not
Oh, I'll
cool.
take that. Oh, and a 2x. Oh, someone's shooting.
Yeah, I thought I just heard that.
It just.
Was that Zero dropping in? It definitely
No,
sounded
yeah,
like-
I saw something. I saw the bullet hit the ground.
Oh, okay.
That is that double tap you were talking about earlier too.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna drop this for that. Oh damn it! So are you dropping a white one or something? Because I thought I dibs the white one earlier,
I don't think I had any. Oh, I didn't.
and then I couldn't find it.
That's probably back there somewhere.
I'll pick
saw
that
when
up.
you
I
did it.
didn't know you did.
Okay, I mean maybe I didn't. No, you're good. Keep it,
So
keep it,
you
keep
still
it, keep
have
it.
Or did you drop it for the blue one somewhere?
No, I thought Zero pinged it, and I thought I dibsed it, but it.
Zero,
yeah.
you pinged the blue one, right? So then
yeah.
you dropped the white
It's
one
still
earlier.
there.
Somewhere,
I never picked up the blue one because you were saying somebody had fired at us, and or whoever did, and so I was getting the fuck out. I didn't want to get
Oh,
shot.
so that blue one's there.
The
won't
blue
get
one is
shot,
still
man.
pinged. The blue one is still there.
Oh yeah, okay.
The blue one. There was like,
Oh, there's another blue one that's still there. I've got, still got it.
I don't see it.
oh, and there's,
Yeah, I know,
you
but-
still see another blue one?
Well, it's because I pinged it. It's the one
Oh,
Joe
here you go.
or whoever
Problem
originally.
solved. I just found another blue one.
That's a lie.
No, it's a blue one.
Oh, you're talking about a lot? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're talking about a heavy. Oh, we were talking about Joe pinged the light white mag. Like,
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
one.
Not
No,
bad.
no.
Not bad.
You better be your bed, Mr. Zero, causing all types,
Yeah, you
all
better be
types of
bad.
confusions.
We all get murked while clearing out the mag.
Yeah. I can see that, man.
Wouldn't be the first. Wouldn't be the first time. Ooh, a 301, eh?
Shit is popping off like over to the east, but it's way far away.
Oh, when you picking up that 301, I'll definitely pick that shit up.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, but ammo here.
Well, it sounds like there's shots like right. I don't see it, but it sounds like it's like right over there.
Okay, I see shit blowing up over there.
Alright, do we want to push it?
Actually,
yeah,
the ring
sure.
is closing. The ring is closing. No,
Okay.
Oh, it is. I
Coming
just
in
got
real
grabbed.
Alright, then yeah.
They'll be running.
Yeah, I'm gonna
towards
get up top. Actually, I'm getting on that
Oh,
roof.
can I get out here? No. How do I get out of this bitch? How do I get out of this bitch?
Keep moving. Keep moving. Shit.
Sorry, I'm the healing broad. No, I'm a healing broad. Stop healing.
I have some extra light ammo.
Why would you heal?
And a
I'm
big
good on mine.
shield cell. Yeah.
Oh, here's somebody.
Somebody right there.
Shit.
Go around the other side.
Behind the tree. Oh, there's two of them. Three of them. Oh, the shield.
Behind that rock is a Bangalore. Broke this robot. Okay.
One
There's
down.
more than two. There's like someone else sniping from all the way up there. Fuck, man, I'm done.
72 blue up top.
They're up here sniping.
There's another one up there too. Somebody's shooting from behind us, I think.
Yeah, there's mad motherfuckers over there.
Two. I got double shot. There's one. One just
Alright,
put me
I
out.
need to retreat
Yeah.
a little bit. Oh, there's two more coming
Shit.
from behind you.
Yeah, get away.
Fuck.
I'm dead.
Get out of there.
Yeah, hell. There might be a third party these fools if they hurt each other bad enough. Oh, somebody just got put down where you were looking, Grim. Do you have your ultimate to stealth in there? I don't know if it'll let you. You know better than me.
No, I just used my ultimate. But it's bad.
Oh no.
Bamboozle, bamboozle.
Hell to yeah.
Oh, there's like more people over there too. Goddamn. Oh,
Damn. Surround.
Oh, the ring's closing. The ring's okay.
On the ring's closing. I'm
Yep.
gonna die.
Maybe they'll fucking die.
Yeah, maybe it'll leave you alone because of the ring.
Oh no, this sucks. Oh, this sucks.
Gotta get up to those train tracks.
Oh, can I get through
Yeah,
this?
train tracks.
Somewhere here? Oh, yeah.
There's gotta be, yeah, right there. Oh, this is awesome. Way to go, Grim.
That was a little.
Yeah, this shit's
sketchy as
crazy.
shit.
Yeah, dude. Way to go. Oh, and the fucking train yard thing is in the circle. Revived for the... Oh, I bet you got dudes in the yard up here.
Oh, and that's it. Oh, I thought I wasn't even in the circle yet. I wasn't viewing.
Yeah, you're
You're
not.
not in the circle, but you're ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought.
I thought I wasn't safe, like I'm
It
not.
looks like it's stuck. Oh, somebody just used that thing. Alright. Going this way. Yeah, there's one.
Yeah, you got one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's two in the
Dude, this is
circle.
going to be real. Okay. Oh, shit.
Oh, and the vault's open. Look at that. It's all like mediocre shit. Mediocre.
Oh, do I have to get burned?
Yes.
I have one more.
No, no. Hey, if you want to go back into the, you can't make it. You can't make it revive. Oh, I see what you're saying. You have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I found the one for me,
Damn
so
it.
I'ma fuck with her because she fuck with me, yeah. I'm trying to eat, we can go hit a steakhouse, or fuck it, we can stay at home and order some takeout. It don't matter to me as long as I'm with you. Cause I'm in love with you, baby. What's I gotta do? I'm trying to ride out with you, feel the vibe out with you. You're supposed to get on a plane, I'm trying to hide out with you, huh? Yeah, you got me going crazy.
CD Okra.
I didn't think I was gonna pull that off. That was rough.
It was,
Once
dude.
I
That was
like,
an awesome escape.
once I went for the second one and I was like on top of this truck and get shot in the back, I'm like, yeah, this isn't happening.
Dude, you're almost top 5. I mean, you're one spot away from top 5. That's amazing, dude.
Oh, nice. This it doesn't look like it's looted.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yep, for sure.
I think I hear footsteps though. I don't see them.
Oh, I see them coming. They're coming from the hill to the south. They're coming from that
Oh
area.
shit!
There's a blue
They're on the
house in
roof up
here.
there or something.
Charger rifle, wingman.
God damn.
Oh, they're on that
Charlie
roof.
in the trees.
Supplies are here.
Already?
Oh, they're on the
From
railroad track.
Zoro.com.
Where?
ZORO.com. They had everything.
Even Ansel cleaning
cover
gloves
from
in
the
small,
railroad
medium,
track.
and large?
Yeah.
Dish soap?
Yep. Gone, right?
Air freshener and
Oh, I was able to loot a little bit. Okay.
Yes. But why so much?
Shit.
Jim?
Jim keeps
Now-
reheating salmon in the break
Let's
room. Last week
converge
an
on
intern
Dream if
nearly
you can get
Yeah.
to him
Do
safely.
you want that on your
I
hands?
want to drop some heals once we get there and
Gloves to
heal.
soap to things that
They're
clear
right
the
up
air,
there.
Every part plays a part.
Okay.
Find them all.
You don't have
at
a syringe,
Zoro.com.
do you?
I got heals. I'm the healing lady. I'm the healing lady.
I don't know.
There's some heavy in here. There's some energy.
I'm not fully
Oh shit!
healed.
Yeah. Oh, it's 3 seconds. 3 seconds. 1 second.
We're still.
Hey, we're top
Here.
5.
I just dropped my thing.
Yeah, we're in the circle.
Here's that. There's that.
You guys need lighter, heavy ammo?
I could use either one.
Yeah. Here I can drop. I can drop 40 heavy.
Okay. Okay, that's enough for me. That's
Okay. I'm cool with that. I can.
I guess I'll take that other box because I didn't have too awful much. I got enough for 5 though.
Did he get on this
Nah.
truck here yet? No?
Don't think so.
There's somebody over there. I see somebody.
All right. Let's go take
Okay.
their stuff.
Back there. They're hiding back there like a bitch. They're probably by themselves.
Okay.
Alright, I'm gonna kick it off with an arc star.
Okay. Yeah. I just grabbed an
Alright.
arc star as well. Haha, nice.
I'm taking some of those heavy. There's 200 more rounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm cool. I'm doing some shit whatever else.
I'll take that anvil for my shit.
Some bullets and cool stuff.
Here I got cells to spare.
So they're still up there. You need to go that way. There's 1 minute.
I've
We can
got-
make a loop around the back if you want, around this
Oh,
side.
okay.
Yeah.
You wanna do
Yeah,
that?
let's
We
do
got
it.
quick though.
Tactically sound.
Let's do this.
I got a zip line, so if we get in a tight spot,
We get in a tight spot. He can use his long schlong dong to loosen it up for us.
Oh, I think I hear them fighting
Alright.
each other. Yeah, they're still shooting.
All right, all right, all right.
we're right behind you.
Did one of you
No.
just reload? Up, motherfucker, right
No.
here.
Okay.
Always probably coming.
Oh god, on top
Where
of
is
the rock,
he?
on top of the rock.
Oh, somebody just laser rifle.
I'm getting shot in the back.
Yeah.
The other
That squad must have been running from the others, and then they
Oh
started
shit!
fighting.
I'll be back. I gotta go get my hot dogs. They're
Okay.
All over the place. I'll be back in a little bit.
Alright. Oh shit. It's like as plump as a hot dog.
That's the best way to eat them. Take that long, big, swollen, girthy, penis-shaped object.
We gotta leave his squad while he's eating his dog.
Yeah.
I'll join you.
Alrighty then.
Wanna put it on
Doses. Let's do the doses.
boiled hot dogs. That's the worst way to make a hot dog. Sometimes you gotta have a way you can't be attending when you're playing video
I mean, there's only three.
I mean, I'm sorry, that's my
There's
opinion.
only three ways to make a hot dog.
I'm not
You know what I
trying to
mean?
be a
Like,
bitch. Yeah, well, I mean, I would say grilled is the best and fried is the next best. I don't know.
I would agree.
mean, boiled
I would
is
agree.
okay.
Actually, there's
If I don't have some,
four ways to
there's
make.
a bunch, but I know what you mean. There's, you know, in microwave.
So you think microwaving it's better than boiling it?
Oh yeah. Like if you wrap it in a paper towel and put it in the because it basically fries it in its own grease. I mean, like you zap a hot dog for about 30-40 seconds in the microwave wrapped in a paper towel and it like splits and it's kind of charred.
What? I've never had a charred hot dog from the microwave.
What? Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's not charred, but maybe it like maybe it just tightens the skin up or something. But it
I do
splits
like
it-
tight
it splits
skin.
It open like the grease. Yeah, you know, when your skin splits. On
Yeah.
the dog.
So you get all that extra feeling.
But yeah, I would definitely say it's like the boiling it. I don't know. It's just like I mean it's good, but it just doesn't. If you do it in the microwave for long enough, it fries it in its own grease.
I mean, I'll have to try this my paper towel trick. I mean, I usually do the microwave just because it's
Actually fried.
easier.
Yeah, I just use the paper towel to protect the microwave from grease, really. But yeah, it don't you go beyond warming it to where it's actually frying it.
Yeah, I usually do make like 3 hot dogs, pop them in for like I do usually my tactics for everything in a microwave is 45 seconds, then I rotate things and then do 30 seconds.
Well, that sounds about like what I'm saying, but I mean, does it not get them hot enough to like split them open and stuff?
Yeah, but it's sometimes. But
Yeah, you gotta, I guess I'm just saying, do it long enough to make sure they're hot enough to split,
and
you know, or hot enough to get
and
off or
sometimes
whatever.
the I don't know, I guess the paper towel might make more of a difference than like you'd think. It might actually it might actually like keep it from, because like when I microwave it, there's usually like a puddle of grease on the plate, you know what I mean, and that's kind of gross. But if you with the paper towel, that would prevent that from happening, so it might actually make everything better.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it's the only reason I do it is so I won't splatter grease in the microwave. But maybe it like holds a little moisture in too.
There's a level 2 light mat right there for you.
Oh, thanks.
For you, buddy.
You always want moisture on your dog.
And the tight skin. You definitely want the tight skin.
Yeah, tight skin.
Tight skin on that dog.
Did you ever see that Sunny episode where like
No.
like they all have their day and everybody has to do their, you know, that part of the cruise thing on their day, and Mac takes him to like oil up
No.
competition. That's so gross. It just made me think of the tight skin. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not a huge fan of It's Always Sunny. Yeah, it just never really spoke to
Yeah,
me.
well, I mean, there's stuff that I don't like about it sometimes it's some funny shit as well. Yeah, I rarely go to bodybuilding competitions to win weight.
I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you just gotta go though. I don't know where those explosions are, but I think we should get involved.
Yeah, alright, I'm right with you. Yeah, they sound like kind of the way you're running.
Ooh, 99.
Are you streaming?
Yeah, no, the streaming didn't stop.
Okay.
It,
Oh yeah, I got you.
Yeah. Let me drop that. Alright, I'm gonna check the upstairs and then we can get involved.
Yeah, you need some armor.
If you need that.
Couple of light ammos up here.
Alright, I guess I'm ready to get involved. Grab that med kit though.
Well, that was close. Closer. What is that? Oh, what the fuck? Never noticed that view of a grenade before. It had like a little orange stripe on it. Most of the time it just looked like they're
Really, I've never seen the orange
something
stripe.
different.
What was that, babe? It was so hard to what?
Yeah, me neither.
These fucking Republicans, you can tell. They're just setting everything up so they can fucking clip it so Fox News has a clip to show. Like, it literally feels like a fucking game.
Yeah. I concur.
Like, the one guy spent pretty much his whole fucking
I don't know. There's a med kit right
questioning
there.
of him just to be like, well, isn't it possible that, like, what you heard isn't true? Like, that, like, it's not true, it's not true? And, like, so Taylor's like, I'm testifying that this is what I heard. That's true.
Right.
I'm not saying anything besides what I heard, and what I'm testifying to is true. That I heard this.
Right. So the,
And they're like, well, couldn't you be wrong? Don't people misremember stuff? They just want him to say fucking yes.
right.
And he's not gonna do it.
Well, that's
Fucking
basic.
smarter than
That's
you.
basically like what law is. Like you just get them to like admit that it's possible that somebody else murdered them.
I don't think so.
Oh, there's a gold death box. So there's probably.
Oh shit. Okay. I'm behind
Oh,
him.
hold
spinning
on.
across.
Does that not look like a trap right there? You see? Do you see that? There's like a med kit and like some other shit, just like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I hear him, Joe, on the north side. They're in this. They're really. Oh, I just saw them running. I think right
Okay.
through here. Oh, they're. Yeah, I'm coming.
Another
with
med
you,
kit.
coming with
Damn.
you. Yeah, we got heals out there.
Oh shit, the circle, yeah.
Oh, we gotta get. Yeah, get. I can throw us a zip line when we get up here.
I think they're behind us.
Oh shit, we gotta.
No, they're not. No. Just run. I don't know which way to go. I'm running into a wall. Yeah, they are behind us. Fuck, they're shooting me. I'm smoking and just keep on running.
Oh,
Alright.
dude, I'm down, but he's almost dead. Oh no, this is a different guy.
I can't.
Fast guy did not hurt at all.
I can't see shit through my own smoke.
Yeah, if you can just get away, whatever. Shit. Oh yeah. You got a Phoenix?
No.
kit? I've got like one or two in my shit, but they're probably
Oh
they
shit.
probably looted it.
Babe, where's Opie? Okay. Alright, because Chibs just left the room. So, alright. Alright, cool.
Dude, I got a Phoenix kit. I got some stuff. Take anything you need, because there's no way I can get back to the box.
Okay.
mean, I don't think so. Got a 301. Oh, I got a decked out, a pretty good scout too. I know you got good guns already.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep what I got. I grabbed all the heals I can. When I get you back, I'll drop one of these guns. I guess I could have grabbed one of your guns rather than force you to take one of my guns, but
Whatever. You're going. If you go to your right in the you see it. You see it.
What is
That might be where they are.
I was just gonna, like, underwear and stuff, I was just gonna throw in. I'll take care of it though. After this game, I just forgot all about it.
Well, I started it. I just didn't know if I should start another.
I hear people around you, Joe. They're chasing you.
I think they're engaged in that.
Don't give me the gun you want the most.
It don't matter to me. 99 or Spitfire, whichever you want. Or there's a flatline in here.
Yeah, that'll work.
There's shield cell, devotion. I know we gotta go to, like 6 feet over.
I'm with you.
Oh, they're right there.
Okay.
I throw thermite in at them.
One's running around that way.
Oh, they're on top of the shit. What? That was crazy.
Oh, yeah, that might be a third.
He.
Another squad came in as soon as the battle was
I slid like past him. I did a little bit of damage as I was sliding past him. Then it didn't even look like he looked at me, and then I died.
Shit hit the fan.
Yeah, like I slid past him and I thought he was still like shooting at you, and then I died.
I got a few real quick.
Alright.
To be right back. 20
Yep.
seconds, 30 seconds.
What's up, everybody? I'm writer and speaker Jamila Lemieux, and I'm hosting a brand new podcast from P&G and Spotify called Harmonize. Harmonize celebrates influence and interconnectedness of music and culture while addressing some of the bias-related challenges that exist within them. This season, we sat down with artists like John Legend to talk about bias. Each episode of Harmonize features a roundtable discussion featuring Black musicians and cultural commentators. Click or tap the banner now to check out
Smoking
Harmonize.
cigarettes, eating hot dogs, eating burritos.
Yeah, man.
Always filling, always long cylinders.
He's always filling his mouth with penis-shaped things.
Not to put too
Yeah.
point on it.
Yeah.
Not a point, whatever.
Too fleshy a point on it.
Not to put too mushroom. Yeah, fleshy mushroom shaped point on it.
So yeah, I only got a few more because I got work, which I fucking
Yeah, it's getting
hate,
late.
man.
Yeah, that's really lame how they're doing it. I mean, I know a lot of places are like that, but it still sucks.
Yeah, and like I was talking to the one lady I was working with, and I'm like, yeah, like that day where like I had to do everything, like I mean, I was really evaluating my how bad I wanted this $10 an hour. And then like later she was like,
Yeah.
well, you know, like every job you're gonna have, there's gonna be frustrations. You're gonna have problems everywhere.
That's bullshit. Man.
Well, no, she wasn't a manager. She's just like a same person I am, but she's been there like 11 years or something. But it's like I know I get that. Well, no, she doesn't do the unloading, but she does do like the processing part, like opens the boxes and like stuff. But it's like, and I get it, but she's part-time, so she works like 9 to 2. Life.
Got a
Okay.
problem for you.
Thank you. Yeah, life is a lot easier when you work 9 to 2. When you're going at 2 o'clock.
shit. Yeah, talking about every job you got, she's working.
Yeah.
Time.
Oh shit. I'm coming.
They're-
I
they're
just.
buddies. I'll call
Okay.
you. I'll call you.
I just saw someone down here also.
Yeah, they're in there. Oh, they're coming at you, Joe, I believe. I don't know.
Here.
Sorry, I didn't even mean to call that out. Thanks.
Yep.
Right above us. Little do they know we are ready to rock.
Yeah. I'm gonna send my drone to get eyeballs.
Okay. Okay. So we got them closer too.
Yeah, I don't know if they saw where our drone came from. If they'll be expecting us.
I think that was right above us when
Yeah.
we shot it right. Yeah, maybe we can lure them to this other squad, and they'll get in the fight. I mean, third party them. Just threw a nade down the shaft.
Oh. Going. Oh, no, I'm not. I was going to go to the roof, but there's
Oh,
shit up there too.
yeah, there's lots of traps.
Alright, yeah.
I'm gonna go. See, how did those two squads not get in a fight with each other?
Some bullshit is how they. Actually, I'm gonna drop this parallel. I don't really have enough bullets for it.
I'm going down to
Yo,
these pins.
I'm coming to you. Bin time. It's bin time, bruh.
Been about that.
I've been about that bin life. Oh, there's people in here, I think. Oh, behind us.
Yeah, okay.
What?
Oh, I was being aggressive there because I was right on him. He just murked the shit.
Damn. He put the mark into this quirk. Yep.
Yeah.
Super dead. Invite this though. Yeah, I got a couple more games. A little bit. But I'm off Friday and Saturday, so I can stay up maybe till 1 o'clock on Thursday night.
I can't ready up.
Yeah, I can't either. Something's screwed up.
Grim comes and breaks everything.
Oh, now I'm in the lobby.
Now
Oh, I just left. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe broke it.
I still can't ready
We're
yet.
getting ready up in Joe's. Yeah, let us invite
Alright.
Joe.
Oh, because I have it set on duos still. That's why.
Oh.
Because we were just playing duos. That's why.
This is amusing. I don't see. Yeah, why don't you invite us again, Joe? Because I think you're offline. I'm offline.
I shouldn't be offline. I thought I fixed that shit.
Well, it's not showing you on my little in-game thing for whatever reason.
It says I'm appearing online.
Yeah, I guess it's just Apex screwing up. Yeah, but dude, that lady, I know she was trying to be nice, but she's she's like, she doesn't understand the struggle. Like,
right, like I'm like
you know,
I.
She's not unloading trucks multiple days a week, getting called out to the car.
Right.
All jobs are like that, but not all jobs try to screw up the schedule in a ridiculous
Right,
way.
I get that there's frustrations at every job, but it's like I don't mind dealing with the frustrations or dealing with the bullshit. What I mind is the $10 an hour. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
this wouldn't be as big of an issue if I was making 13. Which when I had the interview, I told him, he asked what I was looking for, what I would be hoping to make, and I told him 15. I said, with my age, my responsibilities, if I could, you mean like 15, is what I'm looking for. But I said, I understand if that's, when he like made a face, I'm like, I understand if that's not possible because I didn't work retail before. And he's like, the best I can do is 10. And I'm like, oh man. He's like, well, yeah. He's like, that's why I like to get this question out of the way early, because not only are we evaluating if you're going to be a good fit here, but you're also evaluating if, I mean, it's something you're interested in. So I get that out of the way, because if we can't even agree on that, then there's no sense in going any further. And I said, all right. I said, well, you know what? Getting into the holidays, I need money for Christmas. I'll take it. But I was supposed to be working the truck Tuesday and Thursday, because that's what they really needed, and the rest of my hours were supposed to be on the floor, and that's not what it's turned out to be.
Yeah.
So.
Have you told them that?
No, I haven't had that conversation yet.
That's the deal.
Well, because they also have a policy that everybody in the store does everything, but that's not true. Right? That's not true for everybody. Like there's the people in the back that do processing, like the one lady Dawn and the other dude Kenny, they don't go up front and help customers. At least not that I've ever seen. Other people do. Yeah,
Grandma Geppetto doesn't unload the truck.
Right. Other people do some stuff. But,
well, just keep putting in.
Yeah, I got an email from DXL saying that like, oh, you're such a great customer. How would you like to work for us?
I'm hearing somebody. I think it's somebody underneath me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm down. I don't have a gun.
Shit, I'm coming, but I'm far from
Yeah, I don't have a gun.
I'll drop a havoc for you.
I just broke this Bangalore shield busted. I can't hit her. There's somebody else behind me.
Okay.
Oh shit, I'm getting smoked. Fuck, I can't see anything. Oh shit. I'm gonna run away and
Somebody's here? Now he's shooting.
shield.
Got another.
Nice shooting, bro.
I hear somebody else
Yep.
coming from there.
What the fuck? Oh, it's uncharged.
Right there, there's a Mirage.
They're up top here.
Yep. Oh, and one jumped down
Jumped
too.
off.
Damn, bro.
I could use a vest or some light ammo.
Alternator in there.
Oh, here's a vest. Top is empty.
Joe, did you
Yeah,
find
yeah. I
that?
just picked up a Havoc out of one of those boxes, and I got a RE45 with 50 bullets.
Yeah, I could use ammo too, but I've got really used them, I guess.
I found 2 syringes. Yeah, I have not even a full clip in my R45.
Oh, there's light ammo right there.
40 bullets.
Yeah, go for it.
There's 2 shield cells.
I'll take those.
That's all the shields I've found.
Take those cells. I'm dropping
Here,
a purple
there's
shell.
light ammo right here for your 45. In the room you dropped all that stuff, I think. Right there.
Yeah, I thought you picked it all up.
Nah, bro, nah, bro. Nah, bro. Nah, see, there's more energy ammo over there, see?
Yeah. Yeah. The bag here. Somebody needs that weird.
Oh, does people need,
Yes,
somebody's got a heavy gun? Who's got a heavy gun?
Yes.
Alright, boom, boom,
I do.
boom.
I'm looking in the barn thing here.
Yeah,
Techno
no,
barn.
look, yeah, I'm up top.
I do need a bago. When we see a bago.
You know.
There's a Havoc and
Bullets with it? Yeah.
energy ammo up there. Yeah.
If you okay.
There's a Bago. What's his name?
B-A-G-G-O, B-A-G-G-O. And Bago is his name. Oh, hold on, energy ammo. I like it, I like it, I like it. I like it a lot.
Might be hearing somebody, not sure.
Alright, let me grab this energy. Oh, and a blue energy clip.
I'm moving toward red.
Who's the blue energy clip in all his box?
No. Maybe I did, but I
Saw one
didn't
somewhere too.
have a Havoc at the time of the seeing it. Oh, there's a care package coming in. I'm gonna go check it out though. Because if it's got a Krabero, I'd like to shoot it though. I got it, I got it, I got it, I got it. I'm gonna punch it back up to the sky.
Get all those minis.
That'll boot it.
I can't tell.
I see no bins.
Yeah, it doesn't look good yet. I like this.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Same here. I didn't mean to do that.
Oh shit, we gotta get in the ring, we gotta get in the ring.
Okay, next was energy ammo where I think that Havoc.
Yeah, I'm good for now. I'm not gonna go out I don't know, maybe it's
Also a blue
maybe it's in the
Mac.
circle. I'm good though. I have enough.
Connectedness of music and culture while addressing some of the virus-related challenges that exist.
Yo, Chips, relax, bro. Relax. You don't need a treat. You don't need a treat. I know that's what you want. You don't need a treat. Stop growling at me.
Click or tap the banner now to
Go lay
check out
down.
Harmonize.
Go
Only
lay down.
on Spotify.
He's like, don't be a
Yeah.
bitch. Don't be a bitch, Joe.
Basic.
Stop being a
Basically.
bitch.
Okay.
No, two heavy mags.
Actually, no, I'm gonna try that. Triple take. I don't normally do the triple take. I'm gonna try it.
What you throwing down?
I have it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, triple take's not bad.
Yeah, it's not my go-to, but I figured I gotta keep it different for the masses that come into the stream. They don't want to see.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, it's one of those that can save you or get you killed depending on the situation.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much every gun in my hands. That,
Right.
oh, more energy.
Yeah, we probably ought to push as soon as
Everybody has blue bags.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm running double energy. Just because. So if we see a turbocharger or an extra energy clip, I can use it.
And health fields. All I have is one of those.
Yeah, I got 2 syringes.
Oh, I do.
Oh,
I
there's
do.
2 syringes. I'd still give you 2 syringes. No, bro.
Oh, somebody's here. Somebody's here.
Anybody was...
Okay. Broke the shield. Enemy. Oh, there's 2 of them up here.
What? That's bullshit.
What the?
I was down hidden behind the fucking ground.
I'm getting shot by more than 11.
Yeah, woo! Go, 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 team, go, team, go. Go, team, go. One more, and I'm turning the music off for it.
Getting
Maybe I
cereal.
ought to turn
Yeah.
my music on just to, interest the symmetry. No.
I mean, I like symmetry. Yeah. Let's get weird, bro. Alright, so it's... We're gonna get crazy. Alright, I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna switch it up to some... Switch it up to some Bangalore. You just played her the last 5 games. That's just what I want them to think.
That was a hardcore switch.
Yeah, man.
Switch so hard you switch back.
Yep. Definitely. Some
That's
shit
pretty
like
hard.
some shit like that.
See that blur right before you bite it?
2 tears in a bucket. All right. I'm turning off the face cam. I'm standing up.
Are we landing all in the back? I mean, on the hanging thing?
No, I'm not.
I am.
Alright, I'm gonna back up.
I'm gonna land in the ground. I'm gonna land in the ground. My mic is being dumb.
Long as you stay above it.
I will do my best to do my duty to Grim my zero.
Dickhead landed with me. I'm dropping down. Shit. Getting the fuck out.
What? Yep, it's good. Good time to end it. This is bullshit.
No, you stay where you're at, homeboy.
That was such bullshit.
Get this fool.
Yeah, I hit him for 75. He's going that way. He's past that though. He ran past. Got him. Okay,
I'm crawling around.
I hear another one, Grim. Hear another one.
I need a vest. I was killing that guy, so hopefully I'd get a vest.
The other guy's right around us, stalking us somewhere.
Oh shit, I got a 301. Oh damn, I'm almost dead.
Nice shooting.
That fool.
All 3 of those were headshots.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Hell yeah. I'm coming to get your tag. I hear the other guy, Grim. Around
right.
Other side of this wall.
Yeah.
He's
Sounds
he's in the
close to me.
bins. We're
There
pinching
he
him.
is.
We're pinching him. Where he is? I got a bad guy. Okay.
Like behind this wall here. Up, he's going around this side.
Okay.
You see him?
Yep.
Oh, what? I thought that was
Oh
the
shit!
third
Somebody
guy.
else.
Oh,
I can't
whole
do it.
other squad.
Oh
Whole other squad.
no! Oh shit! God damn it!
Oh.
Yeah, well, that was real, gentlemen. I got to go to bed and cry myself to sleep.
All right, Joe.
So, I will be on
Why did it
again
end that
tomorrow.
way?
Right. Tomorrow, what's today? Today's Wednesday night. So yeah, I'll be on tomorrow. For some space lock air travels. But yeah, I'll see it. So I'll be on. We'll do some. I don't know. Do some Apex. See how it goes. Tonight was not a good night. Wednesday night.
Some first.
Wednesday night is always. I've noticed this before. It's not always, but it's usually a bad night. Usually people don't come into the stream.
Yeah, you had some good games.
And
though,
I didn't have my first game. I think I had
it's off and on.
1 kill and 420 damage. I don't think I beat that in kills or damage since.
That's why it's called Sauce Wednesdays. You've sought yourself out.
Yeah,
Well, it's actually called
The old psycho.
Reckon Ranked Ladder Wednesdays with all W's, but it didn't work. So, but yeah. So I will. Yeah, I'll be on tomorrow doing something cool. Hopefully.
Alright.
And I'll talk to you gentlemen later. Adios. Yeah.
Better tomorrow.
Hopefully.
Alright.
Alright, so let me drop this with the jump down, bam. Looks weird if I crouch, so I will just. So I want to thank everybody for stopping by. I appreciate it. Means the world to me. Whether it's Facebook, Twitch, Mixer, YouTube, whether you're here for 1 minute, 1 hour, or whatever, 22 seconds. I appreciate it. Shout out to Miss Ashley Lynn Blaze, first time stopping in. Appreciate that. Yeah. I appreciate all these anyway. Thank you for coming out. I gotta get to bed. I'll be back on tomorrow, like I told them. Tomorrow night around 10. Hopefully I'll be on time. Definitely do a little bit of Apex, maybe something else, maybe a little bit of Bless, maybe some Minecraft. I don't know. We shall see. I'm losing my train of thought. Anyway, yeah. So appreciate all the engagement I get on social media also. It's Mechanic on all socials except Twitter. It's Mechanic G. Also follow Zero Logic. Zero Logic Gaming on Instagram and Facebook. Join us on Discord if you're interested. Just message me. Any Zero Logic people that are out there that watch this, if you're interested in the Zero Logic GG shirt, I'm going to be done taking orders soon. Definitely by the end of the month. Hopefully before that, so we can get them ordered and get them in by Christmas. Again, let me know, even if you're not a Zero Logic person, if you just want a cool shirt, support me and the group. We're actually not making any money on it. It would just be, you'd be like a walking billboard, and we would appreciate it. I would need a size and a location so I can get them made and price out shipping. I'll get prices on everything before anything is finalized, before I gotta pay anything. But yeah, whatever. Just get at me on Instagram, Facebook. Appreciate each and every one of you. I love you. Today was a terrible night, but we'll do better again tomorrow. Yeah, thank you for stopping by, and to those who didn't stop by,